Oh la la, il pleut.
Il pleut. Oui.
Sorry for the remedial French. And welcome to Tournament in a TeaBreak Day 11, otherwise known as Noah's Day. It has rained pretty much non-stop since I got here around about 9:30, 9:45. What about you?
I left a little bit later than you. You got better work ethics than me, Ross. But I left a little bit later than you. But other than the time that I spent in the metro, I've been rained on pretty much all the way here too, and it continued to rain once I got here.
It's a very frustrating day for not only us, but for the players and for the fans as well. They have actually said, the French Federation have actually said that anybody with tickets for today will be able to come in free of charge and have access to Suzanne Lenglen, provided there are seats available. Now, this is the thing, because obviously by tomorrow we should have been into the semi-finals. They on the one hand, they'll get a bit of a bonus because they weren't expecting quarterfinal matches. But yeah,
there are ticket holders for tomorrow already.
There are ticket,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is the mess that happens. But more importantly, let's look at who comes out of this well and who comes out of this not so well. So if we start with the actual players of today, so we should have had Halep and Anisimova and Keys and Barty up first, if my memory serves me right. So now they look at a prospect of potentially playing 3 days in a row. So we're on Wednesday now, so there'll be Thursday for the quarterfinal, Friday for the semi-final, Saturday for the final. Now, the women play 3 sets, so it's not a particular disaster because this is what they do on the tour. But if we look at the men, so we have Djokovic and Zverev and Thiem and Khachanov will also have to condense their matches. Now this is where it starts getting tricky with best of 5.
Yes.
So give me your insight onto who suffers and who comes out of this slightly better on the men's side.
Well, before I get into the specific players, let me just say this. The problem is twofold. The one problem is that the quarterfinals are played on different days. They are scheduled on different days to begin with, which opens the door for this type of mess.
Correct.
Which should not be. Wimbledon is the only one that gets this correct on the second week of scheduling. And then, when this rain occurs, so now what's going to happen? Just like you said, the two quarterfinals of today will play tomorrow. It'll be fine if one of the players wins in straight sets.
Yep.
That'll be fine. They're professionals. They played majors before. If they win in 3 straight sets and they go out and play the next day, another 3 out of 5 set match. That is similar to a ATP 1000 series event where they might play a 3-setter in the semifinal, and then another 3-setter the day before, and then maybe a couple of setter for the final. So 3 days in a row, 7 sets, 2 days, 5 sets, 6 sets. It's acceptable. But I think the problem begins if one of the matches go 4 sets or 5 sets. And then they're going to end up facing another player who may have played 3 sets in the earlier match of the day, or a match that may have ended earlier than the 5-setter. The recovery time will be less, the gas in the tank will be less, and furthermore, it's going to put them at a disadvantage, perhaps for the final, even the winner for the final.
And I think that's something that we saw how that cumulative effect affects the men. We saw it when Andy Murray made the final. He had gone the scenic route more times than we cared to mention. And by the time he got to his first Roland Garros final, he was spent. We saw it with Zverev last year, like 3 5-setters in a row. By the time he made it to the second week, huzzah! Finally we get Zverev in the second week, and he was absolutely spent when it came to his quarterfinal with Thiem. So we can't overemphasize enough that this scheduling, probably at the behest of television, has really royally screwed the players. But also, as you say, they are professionals. This is what they're actually paid a ridiculous amount of money to do.
Yes, and let's be honest. If somebody wanted to counter argue our point just now that we're making, is they could give the example of Rafael Nadal at the Australian Open finals about 10 years ago, Ross? Is that it? Where he had to play a 5-setter against Verdasco because of rain delay, and then the next day he had to come out and play Federer again in the finals, and he won that in 5 sets too. So it is possible, but at the same time, that's rare. It's rare. I mean, one example does not change the general rule.
No.
And I believe in general, if you look at it, when players that fall into this situation do suffer, it's a lot of sets to play. At the same time, I will also say this, but it won't matter by the time the finals come if we don't have more rain. But having 2 days off in a row, the way Roger and Rafa are right now, I'm not sure if players necessarily like that either. But that's a different,
Well, let's touch this, because I've just come off Love Sport Radio, where we were talking about surely this helps Jo. And I'm thinking, I don't know that it does, actually, because she is a rhythm player. And she has gotten into this rhythm, and she has gotten progressively better as she's gone. I think it's probably fair to say that, she struck this level from Diachenko onwards. Because that was a blazing display against Diachenko.
Absolutely.
And from that point on, she has been unstoppable. Now, you think, well, she's had a day off, but it's not that simple. On their days off, they're going to have a pretty regimented practice routine. What they're going to sort out in practice. Don't forget that if it's raining, practice is going to be curtailed.
Yes.
I don't know if there are any indoor facilities that they use.
They have access, perhaps. They have access, but it's not the same.
No.
The same.
No, I mean, we've obviously seen that. If you look at Stuttgart, it's like playing tennis on a skating rink.
Of course.
So that will be impacted as well. The nerves of a semi-final. I mean, Jo's been to 2 semi-finals, so I don't feel as worried for her as I maybe would feel for someone like Vondrousova, who's never been to this before.
Yes, this is completely new for her. This pattern in the second week of a major and having to take all of a sudden 2 days off. I'm not sure that Vondrousova played any tournaments at any level where she had 2 days off between matches. Well, it's just hard to believe. The
only one that comes to mind, I think, would possibly be Rome, where then everybody, and I mean everybody, had a double header.
That's correct.
That's the only recent, but that's a double header in a week. That's not a double header in the middle of a play one day, have 1 day off type thing. So I don't know that it's going to, but on the flip side of the coin, for the 2 old men, is this going to be an advantage for them? Because I know people come back to their age, and I know people will throw their hands up in disgust and say, age is just a number. But actually, at the ages of 37 and however old Nadal is, an extra day's rest might not be a bad thing, considering that match is likely to be grindingly hard.
Of course, yes. In the case of Federer and Nadal, 37-33, an extra day of rest, I'm sure, is welcome by their bodies. I'm just not sure if it's welcome by their tennis, by their timing. And, for example, Nadal has been known to sometimes have a slow start in matches. Roger, not so much. Sometimes he starts on top and he starts fast. Now, maybe Rafa is going to end up having a slow start because of the 2 days off, and Roger gets an early break in the first set. It's possible. The reverse is possible too. But the bottom line is, when you have 2 days off, first of all, let's consider the matches they've had. Rafa had a 3-setter that was as routine as possible.
Oh, you're talking about Nishikori, right?
Yes, exactly. Roger, you were talking about Zverev earlier with 3 5-set matches. How about Nishikori, right? But okay, so Rafa had as routine a match as possible. Roger had a much tougher match against Wawrinka, but still got out of there in 4 sets. And I can't remember the time of the match. It was less than 3 hours, I believe.
Wow.
I believe so. I'm not sure. I might be wrong on that. But okay, I think both of them would be just fine playing with just 1 day in between. Well, now again, back to your question: is it welcome for their bodies? For their bodies, it's welcome. I'm not sure that it's welcome for their tennis.
Interesting. So, as we understand it, the schedule will start 2 hours earlier, which begs another question. We may as well throw this in for discussion. I've got an app, just a simple app on my phone that basically says, make sure you've got waterproof shoes and take your ultra down jacket, and you're British, so carry an umbrella. If I can look at the AccuWeather app on my phone at 7 a.m. tucked up in bed, please explain to me why an organisation with weather radars and meteorologists can't look at that same information and think, you know what, we're going to have a god-awful day. Let's put the start time back a little bit so that we give ourselves every opportunity to get play.
No, I agree with you, and it's not just what you see on your app that morning or that. How about just making the schedule that way? You know, instead of having a 2:00 start, how about having a 1:00 start? This is a major where there is no tiebreaker in the final set. What happened if the matches? What would happen if there were no rain today at all? Let's say we had a regular schedule. Let's say the first women's match started, and let's say it went to 13-11 in the third set. Okay, and maybe 4 hours. All right, so now now you're at 2:00. That match is over at 6:15, possibly by the time the men come in, 6:15, 6:30. What if they go to a fifth set? And it's just it would be so much easier to start the match at 1:00. And I'm not sure anyone can explain to me and convince me that 1 hour makes that big a difference in television scheduling. I don't know why the 2:00 start is used here at the French Open at Roland Garros. I believe a 1:00 start or even a noon start would be quite feasible for the tournament.
And I mean, for most of us, that would be quite welcome. It would still be potentially a slightly later start than we've been used to. And when people probably roll their eyes and think, oh, for heaven's sake, what are you talking about? An 11 o'clock start of play doesn't mean an 11 o'clock start for the majority of journalists. Absolutely, there are people that will roll in for the start of a match, then they'll watch television, they'll watch tennis all day, and then they'll go home. But for the majority of us, we're in a good. I mean, I've been in at 8 o'clock most mornings, so that's 3 hours before play is due to start, just to get content up, because we know that our content will get its most hits early in the morning on commuting time. So
it's a question of having access to Wi-Fi also.
Absolutely, the Wi-Fi in my apartment is like wet string. So it's easier to do the heavy lifting of putting a podcast up, putting the audio of the podcast up, getting pictures down from Getty and from Jimmy 48 Tennis Photography, and intercutting all that kind of stuff is just easier to do when you've got predictably good Wi-Fi. It's not necessarily easy to do when your Wi-Fi in your apartment is like a wet fish.
And at the same time, some people may not be aware of that. We have material here at on site that we cannot necessarily use at home. For example, I do a lot of tennis match analyses, and I do I do tactical analysis, and in some cases I do need to rewatch some of the points to make sure that I am not mentioning the wrong point. I'm being accurate. And here we have on the screens we have access to matches. For example, in our podcast yesterday we said I'm ashamed to admit that I've only watched Kachanov 2.5 sets. So this morning I was able to go back and watch Cairns' the third round match, the first set, and now I'm going to go back again now that it's raining, probably watch maybe one more set of Cairns somewhere else. So it gives me an opportunity to look at that, and all the statistics are up there on screen. So we have material here that we need that we cannot have access to while we're eating breakfast in the apartment.
Absolutely, and but I think that makes a difference. I mean, we'll cover this. You're actually going to get a bit of a treat, because we're going to take advantage of the rain delay to bring you the other podcast that we were talking about, of what the challenges are for smaller independent sites to try and keep up with the kind of content that people use. But in the meantime, we will keep our fingers crossed that tomorrow we see a full schedule. If you want to go back and hear what we actually thought about the schedule, please go back and listen to the Day 10 Wrap podcast. And until then, we will bid you farewell, and hopefully we'll have a lot more about tennis to talk about tomorrow, where Mert hopefully will be joining me again.
I would love to.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, thank you for listening. You have been, of course, listening to Ros Satar
and Mert Ertunga.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.